Why read so many things called The Culting of America. Is it better? I'm hoping it's better. Okay. Reading chapter 3 today, or at least part of it. I'm still waiting for Mr. Young to stop talking with his loud voice. Because he's even more deaf than me. Pilots and all. Okay. Finding sports devices and stream on YouTube. Okay. And I read this this Thursday, I will be on the TikTok channel Facts Still Matter, and we will be talking about Un-American, which is the new book I have released as a video of me reading it, not as a thing you can read. Long story. We'll order this baby blanket from me wants her blanket and some really loud needles. So I should not like to get finished. Of course, I need glasses. We'll be off to investigate. Sorry. I'm going to show you all this bonkers amazing collar that I made. Got little things hanging from it. It's got sparkles because I just used a sparkling thing. Cults are an amazing thing to study. Yes. Unfortunate that most of us come by our experience honestly, but happen to be part of little Peppy in the background for good measure. So actively hiding his face from the camera, because that's what he does. So this is going to be The Culting of America, Chapter 3. This is the book I'm writing now. I'm writing it about as fast as you can write 12 research papers in a row that nobody's making you write and keep up with all the other stuff, like the selling of Uncultured. So now I'm making the chapters as they're finished or mostly finished. Like if this turns into a book, there will be a lot of polishing. But in the meantime, you can hear the research. Put everything our way. We're gonna talk about a egg, just tiniest bits. So, anyways, moderators may have to moderate. Chapter 3, but we are saving lives, sacred assumption. We are all familiar with this group, and despite its claims of member anonymity, it's probable that we all know someone who faithfully attends their meetings. They've gained fame for a reason. Their program has undoubtedly saved countless lives. Administered by dedicated volunteers who staunchly believe in its regimented spiritual program as the sole legitimate route toward their shared sacred objective, and that deviating from this path will literally lead to death, it urges individuals to reach out when they've hit their rock bottom. It offers only one method of healing, a rigorous journey of total abstinence. This program, founded in the 1930s during the infancy of brain science, is among the least rooted in medical science compared to other known treatments for disease. Yet it receives consistent recommendations from doctors, as well as other professionals in both physical and mental health fields, in addition to endorsements from courts, judicial systems, and both military and civilian sectors. Given the life and death nature of the issue this group tackles, and the undeniable fact that membership in the group saves lives for some individuals, criticism of the group is often avoided entirely. Those who attempt nuanced critiques are quickly shut down with the thought-stopping cliche, "Please don't risk people's lives just to criticize our program." There is a sacred, glowing assumption that members of this group cling to for their very lives, that everyone who recovers will do it at a 12-step meeting. Even when the data shows that these programs have questionable efficacy overall, many individuals commit themselves for life and vow to continue attending meetings despite encountering problems or harboring doubts, because they are told they'll end up in jails, institutions, or death if they leave. When people accuse Alcoholics Anonymous of brainwashing, a common program response is, well, sometimes brains need to be washed. Why do people join cults and extreme groups? Before diving into the same assumption, there's a salient question most people have. Why do individuals choose to join cults in the first place? Why do they even stay when faced with escalating abusive behavior or when clear indications to leave are apparent? From the outside, it's tempting to view individuals who have joined cults, endured abusive relationships, or been influenced by figures like the Bikram yoga founder as foolish or gullible. Nothing like those of us who consider ourselves wise enough to detect the glaring red flags from a distance. Yet it's worth noting that a Harvard-educated lawyer died on the side of the cult during the Branch Davidian standoff against the FBI in Waco, Texas. Understanding the foundational principles of what researchers and scholars have discovered regarding the motivation behind people joining extreme groups is invaluable. For a while, they thought it was stupidity or poverty, too. Cults or related social and religious movements arise in times of great change, Philip Zimbardo tells us. I just have a note here that says, write about clarity. So apparently, we're missing a little paragraph or two. When delving into the motivations behind why individuals join extreme groups, it becomes apparent that cults and terrorism studies intersect in intriguing and meaningful ways. Drawing from my experience as an intelligence officer involved in counterterrorism efforts during the so-called War on Terror, I've observed striking similarities between the transformative worldview and sense of purpose that terrorist groups offer to new recruits, and the subsequent extreme, almost cult-like dedication these recruits exhibit toward the group as repayment. A parallel phenomenon can also be observed in gangs. In fact, a similar pattern emerges within the US Army, where recruits are enticed with promises of benefits to enlist, then subjected to a process of breaking down, followed by rebuilding, ultimately fostering an intense loyalty and dedication to the group and its objective. This devotion is so profound that it often resembles being in love with one's fellow team members. Clark Macaulay and Sofia Moskalenko, in an article published in a journal titled Terrorism and Political Violence, state that love often determines who will join a terrorist group. The pull of romantic and comradely love can be as strong. The pull of romantic and comradely love can be as strong as politics in moving individuals into an underground group. Dr. Cialdini's liking theory sheds light on this phenomenon, suggesting that recruits are often lured into the radicalization process by charismatic and likable individuals whom they aspire to emulate. While financial motivations may indeed play a role in why some individuals join terrorist groups or gangs, it's not solely about money or lack of resources. Scholars initially examined this question through the perspective of deprivation theory, suggesting that individuals who abandoned everything to join these movements were experiencing real or relative deprivation, whether in terms of financial resources or intellect. However, the student movements of the 1960s and 70s challenged these ideas. Parallel to the cults of the 1970s can be observed in contemporary movements like the Arab Spring and the growing radicalization of individuals, including homegrown terrorists, into American white supremacist groups. These individuals come from diverse backgrounds and varying standards of living, indicating that factors beyond mere deprivation contribute to their involvement. As research on cults advanced, scholars came to understand that the concept of relative deprivation, joining a cult due to poverty or lack of intelligence, although seemingly plausible, had too many exceptions to be scientifically significant. Moreover, the definition itself lacks specificity to be truly informative. Who determines who is too smart or too rich to join a cult anyway? While financial constraints may influence the decision to join an extreme group for certain individuals, overall, this explanation doesn't really hold the Kool-Aid. Ultimately, researchers have identified two primary similarities among individuals who join cults. The first, and perhaps the most straightforward to explain, is a lack of social connections. In his article, The Study of New Religious Movements and the Radicalization of Homegrown Terrorists, Opening a Dialogue, Lorne Dawson explains how those who have fewer social attachments likely have lower stakes in conformity. Hence, they are more available for recruitment to groups that are in high tension or philosophical conflict with society. This motivation is a reflection of social proof theory, which, according to Robert B. Cialdini, PhD, in his book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, is that one means we use to determine what is correct is to find out what other people think is correct. It's reasonable to assume that individuals with fewer social attachments may lack the normal social proof that could counterbalance some of their burgeoning extreme beliefs. Essentially, having more friends increases the likelihood that at least one of them will intervene and challenge your extremist beliefs before they become entrenched. In fact, a former high-level Scientology recruiter once disclosed in an interview that the primary factor preventing someone from embarking on their first clearing experience was a friend expressing disbelief and caution, saying, "No way, man, this is crazy." In Misguided, My Life as a Jesus Freak in a Doomsday Cult, Perry Bulwer recounts his personal journey of radicalization, which led him to drop out of high school in Canada and join the Children of God cult. Among a list of things he describes that could have kept him from making such a momentous decision, he lists a public school education emphasizing critical thinking skills that taught me how to think, not just what to think, would have equipped me to examine and dispute the rigorous beliefs instilled in me. And a reliable mentor could have helped me with that process, advising me before I made the misguided decision to drop out of society. Similar findings have been observed in other types of extreme organizations. Researchers have postulated links between violence and the frustration of important psychological needs, such as the need to belong. Recent research on individuals who have engaged in lone acts of terrorism has shown that, compared to the general population, those individuals were disproportionately likely to be socially isolated and divorced, separated, or widowed. The significance quest theory, as proposed by Kruglansky et al., suggests that individuals who feel marginalized, persecuted, or deprived of control are more inclined to seek ways to restore their sense of self-worth, even if it means resorting to violent means. Moreover, the significance quest theory posits that individuals on a quest for significance may often have limited social connections, thereby compelling them to seek significance elsewhere in their lives. This brings us to the second factor that scholars have identified as making someone susceptible to cult recruitment: being a seeker. It's as if the ideal candidate for cult recruitment possesses specific seeker qualities and personality traits that recruiters from cults or terrorist groups identify and appeal. It's as if the ideal candidate for cult recruitment possesses specific seeker qualities and personality traits that recruiters from cults or terrorist groups actively seek out. I'm not kidding. These groups do have recruiters who are trained to identify and appeal to individuals with certain characteristics. But what does it mean to be a seeker? And what exactly is a seeker seeking? When we explore what it means to be a seeker, various themes emerge from the accounts of former cult members. These include a desire for community, a sense of mission and purpose, answers to life's existential questions, an alternative model of power, feelings of superiority, the transfer of addiction, romantic or comradely love, and validation of grievances about the world. Dr. Janja Lalich, a prominent figure in the field of cult studies, highlights that conventional wisdom suggests that cult members who commit acts against themselves and others must be deranged, unstable, weak-minded, or weak-willed. They must be needy, lost souls who cannot think for themselves. Researchers, clinicians, practitioners, and academics, as well as ordinary citizens, have concluded that cult members must be dysfunctional, mentally ill, or coerced by charismatic but insane leaders. Rather, she tells us, the confounding behaviors of some cult members occur as a logical conclusion to lives that have been gradually constrained in an increasingly oppressive social structure. I like to say that onboarding into both the Children of God religious cult and into the U.S. Army takes a full 6 months. It is a gradual and methodical process where each step seems logical enough, even as it gradually becomes more extreme over time. It is a gradual and methodical process where each step seems logical enough, even as it gradually becomes more extreme. Over time, individuals find themselves increasingly separated from the outside world. The stereotype of the seeker, Dr. Alexandra Stein tells us in her book, Terror, Love, and Brainwashing, is someone generally looking for some kind of spiritual or political commitment. But the stereotype gets an important fact wrong. These people are not looking to submit to a malevolent authority figure or to join a cult or totalist group. She also emphasizes that there are other pathways into totalist groups, that may be even more common for the seeker than the route she took. She also emphasizes that there are other pathways into totalist groups that may be even more common than the seeker route she took, including being pulled in, usually by accident, being born or brought up from childhood in such a group, as I was, being press ganged or kidnapped, or simply living in a totalitarian state. In the field of terrorism studies, Martha Crenshaw, a terrorism expert, suggests that most terrorists are pulled in, almost inadvertently, while pursuing other goals. They might not actively seek involvement in a group, but rather get pulled in through a friend network or a front organization that is entirely different from the one they ultimately join. This type of bait and switch tactic is quite common among cult-like groups. For instance, NXIVM adeptly presented itself as a personal transformation organization, all the while subtly drawing its members into a work and sex cult. In terrorism studies, Venhouse provides a comprehensive breakdown of the various types of seekers. He categorizes the individuals he has studied into 4 distinct kinds of seekers. Ultimately, they all share a common trait: a search for something meaningful and a need to define themselves. Essentially, they are questing for significance. His 4 categories of seeker are the revenge seeker, who is diffusely frustrated and angry and seeking an outlet to discharge that frustration or anger towards some person, group, or entity whom he or she may see as being at fault. Timothy McVeigh is a great example of this, responding to the Branch Davidians at Waco being killed. 2, the status seeker, seeking recognition and esteem from others. 3, the identity seeker, compelled by a need to belong and to be part of something meaningful, seeks to define a sense of self through group affiliations. And 4, the thrill seeker, who is attracted to the group because of the prospects for excitement, adventure, and glory. When looking at terrorist groups, Jasko and Kruglansky tell us in their article, Quest for Significance and Violent Extremism, the occurrence of violence is expected to be more likely under psychological conditions that induce a search for personal significance and meaning in life. Sounds like seeker behavior to me. What is sometimes seen as the need for a religious identity may be at play here, with individuals who are seekers being pulled to search for their true self and their reason for existence, surrounded with others who think like them. In essence, seekers come from diverse backgrounds and motivations. They may be individuals searching for meaning, discontented with current social systems. Some are driven by anger and a desire for revenge, while others are passionate about social justice and seek a cause. There are also those who are simply trying to escape difficult situations at home. Remarkably, these reasons parallel the motivations for enlisting in all branches of the US military. However primed as seekers are, seeking answers to their questions, fulfillment for their deep voids, and seeking community and empathy, they sometimes become willing to shift their worldview. In doing so, they may adopt the ideology of a coercive or totalitarian group in disguise, ultimately becoming ensnared under its sacred assumption. We are reading my book called The Culting of America. I'm going to pin Gregory's response. Wait, you can't pin it unless I respond to it. This is my book in progress, The Culting of America. And it always says culture. And I have to change it. The Culting of America. Now I can pin that. Okay. Talked about the TikTok dance called, yeah, because you haven't had time to watch the TikTok dance called. Called stuff for the us. Day. You don't have a lot of time during the day to watch this. The worldview shift into the sacred assumption. We all possess a worldview. It is a fundamental aspect of being human. This worldview shapes our perceptions, beliefs, and behaviors, allowing us to interact and cooperate with large numbers of other humans who share similar perspectives. The capacity to create and adhere to shared myths and narratives could be the very trait that bestowed upon Homo sapiens the evolutionary advantage that we enjoy today, distinguishing us from all other mammals. In Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, Dr. Noah Yuval Harari tells us that fiction has enabled us to not merely imagine things, but to do so collectively. In fact, he points out that the ability to gossip or to speak about fictions is a much maligned ability, which is in fact essential for cooperation in large numbers. A significant portion of human cooperation and interaction revolves around storytelling and persuading others to believe in those narratives. Dr. Harari proceeds to tell us that the real difference between us and chimpanzees is the mythical glue that binds together large numbers of individuals, families, and groups. This glue has made us the masters of creation. And we have created a world where having a personal worldview, along with a collection of stories and myths to embrace, has become integral to the human experience. While it's true that humans have always felt the impulse to create origin myths, it's also worth noting that there exist countless variations, leaving us uncertain about which, if any, are accurate. This uncertainty has led to the formation of diverse groups centered around shared narratives, which collectively constitute what we refer to as our worldview. And persuading others to temporarily set aside their worldview and adopt yours is a significant aim for cult leaders. Randy Borum, one of the pioneers in developing a heuristic model to assist law enforcement officers in better understanding the process of radicalization, highlights that terrorist groups provide their members not a religion, but a comprehensive worldview. He defines worldview as the ways in which we make sense and meaning of the world and our experience in it. 4 recurring types of worldviews emerge consistently in literature on extremism and violence. I posit that the worldviews of most cults would also fit within these categories. All 4 worldviews are regarded as non-independent. The categories are authoritarianism, characterized by a rigid, dualistic cognitive style and intolerance of ambiguity. It is a stable, learned social attitude with 3 facets: submission to authority, staunch conventionalism, and anger and aggression toward outgroups. It has been linked to a range of traits and attitudes that are consistent with militant extremist ideologies, including opposition to democratic values, civil rights and liberties, and human rights. 2, dogmatism, a relatively closed cognitive set of beliefs and disbeliefs about reality, organized around a central set of beliefs about absolute authority, which in turn provides a framework for the patterns of intolerance and qualified tolerance toward others. 3, apocalypticism, locates the problem of evil in time and looks forward to its imminent resolution. Apocalyptic thinkers perceive death as a collective event and believe that history, past and future, is determined, and that they have a blueprint from writings or teachings about how it will unfold. And 4, fundamentalist mindset, characterized by dualistic thinking, paranoid ideas, an apocalyptic orientation, focus on a charismatic leader, and a totalized conversion experience. And recently, the George W. Center for Counterterrorism put out that all current terrorist threats, both foreign and domestic, are coming from a fundamentalist mindset or worldview. A specific worldview or mindset, as Borum explains, does not necessarily cause radicalization or violent extremism, but it can create or enable vulnerabilities and propensities to affiliate with extremist groups or to become involved in terrorism or cults, I argue, in various ways. We might notice the use of religious sounding language like conversion experience. However, the group or organization doesn't have to be religious in the traditional sense to imbue individuals with a sense of what Dawson refers to as sacralized living. In truth, he tells us, the individuals are seeking, and once they find it, greatly prize a sacralized existence. Like the monks and other religious virtuosi once revered in our societies, they wish most profoundly to live sub specie aeternatus. Aeternatus. Like the monks and other religious virtuosi once revered in society, they wish most profoundly to live sub specie aeternitatis in ways our mainstream traditions no longer really support. Dawson explains that the ascent of a charismatic leader, often deemed essential for cults and terrorist groups to radicalize and carry out significant violence, possesses a pseudo-spiritual essence. This quality taps into the same motivational factors that attract individuals to conventional religions, regardless of whether the group in question is formally recognized as a religious organization or not. Dr. Lalich tells us that some cults may be part of the new religious landscape, but many more have ideologies that stem from other sources: political, philosophy, nationalism, psychological theories, psychotherapeutic approaches, belief in extraterrestrial life, self-improvement regimens, a charismatic figure, and so on. And it's not immediate. The transformation of someone's worldview is a process that unfolds over time. It's not an instantaneous event, nor is it akin to some pseudoscientific notion of brainwashing. Dr. Janja Lalich describes this process as re-socialization into the cult identity in her book, Bounded Choice. Her work delves into this phenomenon with much more nuance than cultural depictions of brainwashing, cults, and coercive control typically offer. Giddens describes resocializations as the systemic breaking down of the person in order to instill trust in the authority figure. An important aspect, Dr. Lalich tells us, is that this is a willing and willful transformation, although that still doesn't actually mean they knew what they signed up for. Interestingly, it takes approximately 6 months for individuals to fully integrate into both the US Army and the Children of God cult. Members of both groups would assert that they willingly underwent the programming process rationally and intentionally. Yes, I do realize I doubled up. And it's not only cults that engage in this process. Resocialization also occurs in groups that are not in institutional settings. Alcoholics Anonymous is one such group, as it tries to change the alcoholics' value system by having them internalize several principles about how to live one's life. The goal here, of course, is to have the alcoholics stop drinking and to continue to refrain from drinking. Similarly, the Children of God resocialized tens of thousands of members to abstain from drinking or using drugs by guiding them to internalize several principles about how to live one's life. They were remarkably successful in their efforts. The majority maintained sobriety for 40 or 50 years until the framework of their life collapsed. Sadly, without the support of the group, many returned to their vices and self-medication in their later years. The children of God technically saved their lives, but that doesn't inherently make it a good organization. If you argue that it doesn't make the children of God a good organization, then why have we, as a society, permitted Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, to employ this as a thought-stopping cliche to dismiss any form of criticism, modernization, or even an examination of their program? Resocialization into a total ideology, also referred to as brainwashing, coercive persuasion, thought reform, total conversion, mind control, coercive control, and bounded choice, results in three significant behaviors, according to Dr. Alexandra Stein. First, the follower is glued in anxious dependency to the group, such as when AA informs its members that the consequence of not attending meetings is jails, institutions, or death. Being in a state of constant fear arousal means they constantly seek proximity to the group to gain comfort. Seeking out this closeness to a group that actually creates the sense of threat. The second thing is that it creates a cognitive collapse or disassociation in the mind of the follower. They come to believe that there is no way out of the perceived threat or situation. The third step is that leadership can now take advantage of this cognitive collapse and interject their own agenda into the cognitive vacuum created. Once fully immersed in this system, once the brainwashing is complete and the new worldview has been adopted, it naturally leads the group member to sever ties with those in their old worldview who wouldn't understand it and might attempt to dissuade them from it. This certainly sounds like what many scholars call a conversion process, but as Dr. Janja Lalich clarifies, conversion is the process by which a person develops a new perspective on life. I prefer the term worldview shift to identify the internal change that takes place as a person adopts a new perspective or worldview and becomes a practicing adherent. Cults demand not necessarily religious fervor, but a complete shift in worldview from whatever beliefs you originally held until you conform to theirs and are tightly bound by what I've termed their sacred assumption. I coined the term sacred assumption about 15 years after leaving my cult at the age of 15. This came after years of being asked repeatedly how people could rationalize acts like prostitution and pedophilia as the will of God, as my own family and tens of thousands of others did in the Children of God cult. It explains why intelligent yet vulnerable actresses allowed themselves to be branded without anesthesia in the NXIVM cult. It also sheds light on why American soldiers are willing to sacrifice their lives rather than let the American flag touch the ground. The reality is that once your worldview undergoes such a profound transformation and you become so deeply entrenched in the group's mentality that you are bound by the sacred assumption, you can justify anything. In the Children of God, the sacred assumption centered around the belief that David Berg, an ordinary white man and failed preacher from California, was, in fact, the prophet of God. As long as this belief persisted, members of the Children of God could and did rationalize any level of atrocity. Similarly, in NXIVM, the sacred assumption revolved around the idea that Keith Raniere, another white man with numerous business failures, was the smartest man on earth. Members accepted this without seeking verification or evidence, placing unwavering faith in Raniere's purported genius and the effectiveness of the executive success program he had developed. In the US Army, the sacred assumption, the unquestionable belief required to maintain good standing as a member, is that the US flag, and by extension, America, are truly worth sacrificing one's life for. This unwavering conviction led hundreds of thousands of us unquestioningly into Iraq and Afghanistan, following orders to kill, and even thinking ourselves deserving of glory. Similarly, in Nexium, women restrained their sisters as they endured excruciating pain, while Keith Raniere and Alice and Mac's initials were seared into their skin. Moreover, thousands of adults in the Children of God read the Davidito book, a 762-page guide on pedophilia, considered one of the worst cult artifacts of all time, and didn't flinch, even when instructed to commit the same acts against their own beloved children. Under the sacred assumption, we can find justification for anything. As long as members of these groups held firm to their sacred assumption, they found justification for any action, all stemming from their reluctance to truly question, could we be wrong? The term cognitive dissonance, unsurprisingly, emerged from research into cults. A man with a conviction is a hard man to change, Leon Festinger says as the opening to his groundbreaking book, When Prophecy Fails. In 1954, Festinger and his colleagues identified a small UFO cult that had predicted an apocalypse on December 21st, 1954. The social psychologists embedded themselves within the cult to study its members before and after the anticipated event. They hypothesized, correctly as it turned out, that after the date passed without incident, the members would not simply disband. Instead, they discovered that many members not only maintained their belief, but intensified their proselytizing efforts to convert others. This defied the conventional understanding of human rationality in decision-making, and the term coined to describe this phenomenon, cognitive dissonance, has been hailed as social psychology's most notable achievement. Importantly, it is not solely an individual journey to adopt illogical beliefs, but rather a function of the group that reinforces and supports those beliefs. Describing how people can believe seemingly conflicting things, cognitive dissonance, Festinger says, the individual believer must have social support. It is unlikely that one isolated believer could withstand the kind of disconfirming evidence we have specified. If, however, the believer is a member of a group of convinced persons who can support one another, we would expect the belief to be maintained and the believers to attempt to proselytize or persuade non-members that the belief is correct. In cults, and with hindsight, it's often straightforward to pinpoint the sacred assumption that gives rise to cognitive dissonance. However, in groups not typically labeled cults, the sacred assumption may be as simple as the belief that our team, our family, or our religion is the right one, simply because it is ours. Team's researcher J. Richard Townsend emphasizes that humans will do almost anything to fit in with groups voluntarily chosen membership in. But, Stephen Kent says, the results of all these institutions are the same. Not a true transformational conversion, but indoctrination. Doesn't say indoctrination. But, Stephen Kent says, the results of all of these institutions are the same. Not a true transformational conversion, but induction into a power imbalance built on members' devotion, hero worship, and absolute trust. There is often a palpable sense of excitement among members, a phenomenon evident in writings about well-known cults like Heaven's Gate. This enthusiastic attitude is also observable among soldiers. In a chapter of my memoir titled Drink the Kool-Aid, I delve into the experience of Army basic training, which can be likened to identity-breaking indoctrination in the language of cult scholars. I recount the pivotal moment when we officially transition into soldiers. The pageantry, the ceremony, the messaging, standing straight as boards, not daring to move an inch, singing of freedom, I'm proud to be an American, when we were, at this moment, anything but free. Despite my feelings of apprehension, I also felt the stirrings of fervor, of dedication, and of the sweetly sad idea of death in service of country. I saw commitment and pride overtaking fear and exhaustion in the faces of the trainees around me. We are ready to graduate. The sensation was eerily familiar. I vividly remembered the excitement amongst the cult's uncles and aunties back in 1993, when our predicted apocalypse was looming. As Y2K approached, they appeared almost hopeful for disaster to strike. They seemed to crave its reality because it validated their life's dedication. I wanted to feel it with them, my fellow soldiers, but my elation was tempered by the ugly familiarity of it all. We're definitely ready to graduate, I thought. Our programming was nearly complete. Our dedication, absolute. As one researcher of Islamic terrorist groups in Pakistan points out, when I began this project, I could not understand why killers I met seemed spiritually intoxicated. Now, I think I understand. They seem that way because they are. Addictive behavior often plays a role in this dynamic, where individuals are persuaded to relinquish their vices in exchange for the strict rules, new way of life, and promise of companionship and acceptance offered by the group. What initially appears helpful soon becomes suffocating, overshadowing their former lives entirely. The intensity provided by the cult matches the intense feeling previously derived from the addictive substances. The intensity addiction finds satisfaction in the high control, high demand environment of the cult. Cults like the Children of God in the late 60s and Scientology today have been and still are remarkably successful at persuading members to abandon their previous dependencies, such as drugs or alcohol. It's conceivable that for many who join cults, it's just another form of addiction. They become addicted to the high control, high demand nature of the group, as well as its missions and the sense of superiority it offers. However, regardless of intention, perhaps AA meetings genuinely aim to assist individuals in abstaining from alcohol. When all members of a social system have identical interests, the result is a situation of optimal control for those in charge. What consistently works to the benefit of the cult is that members must willingly embrace their own indoctrination. The primary objectives of all cult systems of influence include, Dr. Janja Lalich tells us, to get the individual members to identify completely with the leader and the group. Cult members must believe they are in control of their own identity and that they have willingly given control over to their leaders. Lalich describes members of Heaven's Gates as agents of their own transformation. They had made the commitment to change. No one was doing this to them. They were doing it to themselves, sometimes contentedly, sometimes begrudgingly, and they understood that it would not be easy.
Is this the noise too loud?
Most of the noise, but that was really loud.
Oh, sorry. So or go to the dentist appointment today to squeeze one.
Mr. Young, causing trouble again. We are going to ruin the battalion. Okay, where did I stop? Once fully committed and bound to the control of the group, individuals often respond to any valid critique from an outsider with their sacred assumption. But we are saving lives, the fervent AA member will cry out, despite the fact that, according to the best published numbers, the efficacy of the program is questionable at best. According to the best numbers available, AA has a 5 to 8% success rate, the same level as doing nothing for your alcoholism. Imagine this, an orderly standing at the front door of a hospital. Just missing a whole paragraph there. I have to think of what it says. Barring inspectors from entering because, as he desperately claims, we are saving lives in there. Ridiculous, I know. But I think it reveals a deeper level of the sacred assumption that even something we can all agree is good, saving lives, just isn't that black and white. Because we are asked to assume that saving lives is the ultimate good. But who decides which lives are worth saving? And who is then responsible for any damage those saved lives cause? I like to respond with this. And the Children of God sex cult got tens of thousands of people sober too. Did that automatically make them good? One of them was a founding member of Fleetwood Mac, Jeremy Spencer, who would never touch a drug again in his long life. You can Google the accusations of what Jeremy Spencer went on to do with his saved life. The Children of God even had a name for this kind of recruiting: getting high on Jesus. And then, with those lives they saved, they built the world's most notorious sex cult and devastated the lives of their second, third, and fourth generation members. And nobody saved us. This reveals a deeper level of the sacred assumption, the belief that even something considered universally good, like saving lives, isn't inherently black and white. We are asked to assume that saving lives is the ultimate good. But who determines which lives are worth saving? Just repeating. Yep. Well, that's just a whole second paragraph. It doesn't belong. And here's the orderly thing. Okay. We are just going to do a different thing. Okay. Doing nothing for your coffee. I think it reveals a deeper level of the sacred assumption that even something we can all agree is good, saving lives, just isn't that black and white, because we are asked to assume that saving lives is the ultimate good. But who decides which lives are worth saving? And who is then responsible for any damage those saved lives cause? I like to respond with, and the Children of God sex cult got thousands of people sober too. Did that automatically make them good? One of them was a founding member of Fleetwood Mac who would never touch a drug or One of them was a founding member of Fleetwood Mac who would never touch a drug again in his long life. You can Google the accusations of what Jeremy Spencer went on to do with his saved life. The Children of God even had a name for this kind of recruiting: getting high on Jesus. And then, with those lives they saved, they built the world's most notorious sex cult and devastated the lives of their second, third, and fourth generation members. And nobody saved us. Picture an orderly at a hospital barring the door against health inspectors, insisting, "How dare you question us? We are saving lives in there." It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Yet socially, we encounter this response whenever anyone dares to criticize or tries to inspect Alcoholics Anonymous. Personally, I've been accused of causing deaths simply for suggesting parallels between AA's tactics and those I experienced growing up in one of the world's most notorious and harmful cults. Despite being the least medically supported treatment for addiction today, doctors and mental health care professionals across the nation continue to recommend AA, shutting down any questions from their own clients with the justification, but it saves lives. The transfer of addiction is also evident when individuals leave cults. Cult hopping, or transitioning from one high control group to another, is incredibly common. Through writing my story of growing up in a cult and then experiencing young adulthood in the US Army, I've connected with countless individuals like me who have gone through this process. Generally, nothing the military subjects us to is as challenging as what we endured in our cults and childhood homes. It's just, as the military loves to say, too easy because we're already accustomed to suppressing and sacrificing our individuality for the greater good of the group and its missions. When we escape the first cult, often to our own great benefit, we frequently find ourselves yearning for the group, the strong sense of mission and purpose, and the community that, while fulfilling, was enmeshed to an unhealthy degree from the start. Thus, we embark on a search for other all-encompassing groups where we can belong, where everyone is the same. Groups that demand conformity or subject members to gauntlets or rites of passage for membership often compel individuals to abandon their previous worldviews, frequently marginalizing their perspectives or differences instead of embracing and integrating them. The reality is, when your identity is being defined for you, you are in danger. Moreover, any ideology, when coupled with a transcendent mission, can be used to radicalize you. And the next chapter is chapter 4. Do it for the children. Transcendent mission. Very proud of all my little transitions into the next topic. So, am I going to do one more chapter?